Hi, Huntresses. Welcome to Talk Rich to Me,
where we explore the human side of finance. We are your co-hosts,
Yesenia Rhodes
and Stephanie Gutman,
co-founders of Huntress Wealth. Welcome back, Huntresses. This is Yesenia. Today's episode features Taina Palombo-Price, a first-generation American Afro-Latina mother and tech baddie who shares her story of overcoming the scarcity mindset and provides advice on navigating a career in big tech while living in the present. You really are a professional podcaster. You've been invited to many.
Facts.
You've spoken on large stages around the world, including where many famous people have been.
That's true.
And now I get to have you here in my home studio. And I'm so excited for everyone to meet Taina Palombo-Price, who has been such a dear friend of mine for so many years. Mommy's together for the first time. And I've seen just an incredible career trajectory over the past 10 years of friendship, which is kind of insane that we have kids that are 10. Because I don't feel like I'm 10 years older than when I met you.
I'm 30.
Yeah, exactly. I'm 27 is what I tell everybody all the time. I am so happy that you could join us and are so willing to share your story and your financial journey with all the Huntresses out there.
Hi, Huntresses. I'm thrilled to be here. And hopefully some of what I've experienced helps somebody else out there.
I'm certain it will. Let's start out with your childhood. I feel like that's a great, base level for everybody to understand where we came from, what we do, and why we do what we do today.
Sure. I am a first-generation American. My parents immigrated to the United States in the 1960s during a big boom in skilled labor immigration to the United States. And yeah, I think most of my life was shaped by living in immigrant communities and watching my parents build foundational level of status and wealth in this country. And some things were easy and some things were really hard, but it sort of molded who I am and the things that I fight for and that I care about. And I like to think about it in two ways. One way for me is I'm carrying a torch. People say like the sacrifice immigrant parents make is to build a better foundational life for the next generation. I think it is like my core responsibility as a first generation American to take the things that my parents sacrificed to build here and to build on top of them so that my son and his children have a markedly different place to start than from where we started.
That's beautiful. Where did you grow up, Ty?
All over. I don't have a home. New York City is where I was born. I lived there a third of my life now, maybe a little bit less. And then we moved to New Mexico when I was going into high school. And then I lived there through college and then moved back to New York when I got married. And I've been in Austin for 14 years. So it's a split childhood. I don't know where home is. But New York is the community that raised me, living in Harlem and in Washington Heights, and really living inside of communities of color, seeing a lot of different ways that people make ends meet and build life. And then moving to New Mexico, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, one of the poorest states in the union. My dad worked in Native American housing, so I got to see sort of a different perspective on wealth and the way people build community in other parts of the United States. Very different, very spread out and vast, but still very challenging. And obviously living in Austin has been an interesting place to watch a child. I have a 10-year-old son who, as you referenced, is unbelievable that he's a decade old, but watching him live a childhood that's so different in terms of access and exposure, the things he sees every day than what I experienced as a child is interesting to navigate because you want to impart important lessons to your kids that sometimes you learned in a hard way, and something we talk about a lot in our house.
So what was the relationship with money with your parents growing up?
We talked about money a lot. what we could have, what we couldn't have, why we couldn't have it. I was acutely aware of what things cost, what was too expensive, what we couldn't do. And it felt more like a conversation of constraint and of discipline around how we could sort of navigate and be in the world. So I think I was always very aware of the things that other people had that we couldn't have, and the things that other people could do that we couldn't. And it also meant that when we were able to do things like a really nice dinner or a trip or flying somewhere, that it meant something sort of really markedly different to me than it did to some of my peers as we like lived in more wealthy communities as I got older.
Yeah, I can relate to living in those communities that are more impoverished and then moving here to Austin and raising my child in a place that's honestly pretty abundant with so many resources. And we certainly, teaching your child lessons that you learned just because you saw it every day, if that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
even if you didn't. I'm going to be honest, I lived up in a small community. My parents were considered upper middle class there. And I certainly never wanted or lacked for anything, but I feel like that did shape my empathy level for speaking with people and talking about money and understanding that we all come from different places on it. And I'm sometimes scared that I'm not going to pass that to my son. And it's like something we work on in telling him things, even if it's sometimes really funny. Like the other day, we told him his friends moved to Berlin and he didn't understand what that meant, but then he understood. And he was like, "Mommy, when are we going to go visit them?" And I was like,
Yeah, right away.
Yeah, I was like, next summer, because we have to like save money for that. And he was like, "Okay, are we going to fly business class?" And I was like, "Excuse me, sir. Like, what are you talking about? Like, A, how do you know business class exists? But B, no, we'll be an economy, sweetie." No points for that.
No, that tracks for sure. I think being a first generation American is like an effort in code switching. You are somebody at home in like a community that's still an extension of the place that they came from. You're that same person wearing a different hat in your school life or in activities. And I think for my son, like he can be himself all around town. There is not really a need. And I think that code switching it's you personally, it's you financially, it's you professionally, and you have to build that. Like a code switch it's a thing you build, it's a thing you learn, and you understand how to navigate parts of yourself in different environments. And I think that's the thing that I maybe not worry the most about, but think at least for Kiki, he's in a situation where he is mostly in homogenous environments, socioeconomically speaking.
Yep.
And I don't know how to recreate the things that I experienced as a kid. I don't know how to recreate free lunches. I don't know how to recreate uh, family members who are getting evicted. Like, that's not happening, which is good. That's like the reason that we planted the seed that my parents brought this foundation to this country. But it also means he's getting further away from what it means to have what we have, even though it's not the most, but it's a lot more than I had. And that is something that we talk about a lot in our house across my husband and myself. I don't know how you do that, but also I think what we have afforded, maybe on the flip side, is that he can have a childhood. Yeah. He's never had to be in a grocery store where we had to put groceries back because the check didn't clear, or had to ration some grocery shop for several days or weeks until the next paycheck. Like, that just hasn't been a reality for him. It's not a stressor for him. It's not a worry. He doesn't carry that. But we do. And we see some of the maybe decision-making frameworks that he doesn't have. because he doesn't think about that. It's like a concern that has not permeated his brain. And
Yeah.
maybe that's good. Maybe it'll happen later. Maybe it's a college thing that happens for him, but he's not navigating environments where people don't have those things happen to him. He just doesn't know that it's happening to them.
Right. And how would you say that call it mindset has impacted your mindset as an adult?
So many ways. I think on one side, I'm grateful, thankful, cognizant of the things that I am able to provide, to have, to avail myself of. And on the other side, I think one of the things that's really hard about living in a sort of paycheck to paycheck scenario is, one, you're like a minute away from a really significant emergency, like causing havoc in your family's life. And on the flip side, when you do have a little bit more, the decision making framework is around momentary moments of pleasure or celebration. And so it's like an extra bonus check means a trip or new clothes. And maybe you need those things, but it also feels like a luxury. And so I think on the one side, I carry I feel proud of the things that we've built. I feel happy that my parents own property and are set up for retirement in a way that probably, when my parents were my age, was not something that they were necessarily like fully saw the vision or like understood was possible. But at the same time, there are habits that have to do with scarcity mindset that I still carry and I work on, and I'm not always perfect at. And I think that's like a thing I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life, that I have to learn to fight against or to manage.
I'm sure there are people out there that also struggle with scarcity mindset. I think as women, we're more predetermined to viewing ourselves in scarcity mindset. What does that scarcity mindset look like for you?
Well, I can share. I had my first experience of job loss last summer, which was traumatic and sudden and shocking. And the mental mindset for me is like, I'll never get back. I'll never get another job like the job I had. The job market was terrifying. If you were in it in the last couple of years, you can be very qualified and still navigate a lot of tumult and risk aversion in the market from employers, and the immediate demons I think that you carry with you, like, this will never happen again. Like, I thought I would never get another job. I mean, I know that's not realistic, but it's like your brain starts to believe that what you have is what you'll have and that no more will come, even though all the evidence is to the contrary, even when you're having many interviews. And I think persevering through that process and ultimately like rejoining the workforce a few months later was a reminder to me that some of these auto triggers that happen because you've been in a place where no more is coming, that is not like a finite reality. It doesn't have to be. There's a lot of different ways that you can provide financial stability for your family. It doesn't just have to be the same kind of job you just had, but your brain goes back to like a trauma scar. My dad went through a really nasty situation in a job that turned out to be sort of fraudulent, and he ended up leaving that job and it turned into a legal battle. And I remember those feelings of like, he's the breadwinner and what are we going to do? And we had to move back from New York to New Mexico. And, I carry those things. It was the same sort of immediate feeling I had in job loss. But I came through the other side, and I think I'm learning to cope with the things that come sort of immediately from your brain. It's like a rush of negative, finality laden thoughts, and sort of figuring out how to use reason. Use reason. And also, for the first time probably in my life, we were in a financial situation where we were able to weather the storm without a significant, the first feeling is, are we going to lose our house? Do we need to move out of the state? Like, none of those things happened. It was because over the years I've had the opportunity to grow some wealth to allow us to be in a oh shit situation available to not have significant trauma to the way our family is structured. And furthermore, maybe like hearkening back to the last part of the conversation, like my son never found out. He went to camps. We went on a summer vacation. It was different than the vacation we intended to take, but it was okay. And I don't think there's any other period in my life, at least not in my married family life, that we would have been in a situation where we could do that. And so I think setting yourself up, even in ways where you feel uncomfortable to do so, can really be a way to help mitigate those like trauma triggers that make you feel like it's the end of the world when something, maybe not, job loss is not necessarily catastrophic, but something that feels catastrophic happens to you.
That is like catastrophic and wasn't part of the trajectory or the plan, you know? So thank you so much for sharing that. So we talked a lot about your childhood and what was your career journey? The transition to adulthood from childhood, let's say that.
Yeah, happy to talk about that. I think my story is a little bit atypical because of the variety of places that I grew up. I went to a public high school. I went to all public schools, New York Public City Public Schools, Albuquerque Public Schools. I'm a
What was your PS number?
PS 75, Emily Dickinson School for Literature and Writing. And I went to all public schools. I graduated from Albuquerque High School. Shout out to the Bulldogs. And I wanted to go back to New York. Earlier, we talked about my family moving. It was pretty traumatic to go from a high or a middle school for fashion design, which is what I wanted to be when I grew up, and getting ripped out of that into moving to Albuquerque, which felt insane. But, you know, a story for a different podcast. It's like why my family made that move. But I went to just like the regular high school. Like I got to play sports. I was in Senate. I was my student body president. I got to do all these things that are very different in a New York City public school. And I think they help teach me about autonomy and participation in community and putting your hat in the ring for stuff that you think you want to do, which if you know me, you know I'm accidentally have become a risk taker. That's sort of how I end up in Austin, actually. But I always knew I wanted to go back to New York, and 9/11 kept me in New Mexico in college for a variety of reasons, even though I was meant to go back to college in New York. And I had an opportunity to work for an international NGO in college, which staying in New Mexico let me take lots of breaks inside of my schooling to go do this volunteer work with an organization called Amigos. And they do sort of like Peace Corps style high school age programs. So I got to live in Mexico and Nicaragua and Uruguay and Costa Rica for a year. So college took me a long time while I was figuring out what I wanted to be when I grew up. I thought maybe I wanted to be an immigration lawyer, which maybe is not out of the cards for me in my life, but it's not where I am right now. And I met my husband, and I was like, the day I graduate, it's taken me many extra years in college because I did all this traveling and living abroad. But the day I graduate, I'm moving back to New York. And, you know, as one does when you're first dating someone, he was like, yeah, whatever. And I was like, no, motherfucker, I'm leaving. So you get on the bus or you get off the bus. And fast forward, we moved to New York. I got a job at an energy efficiency nonprofit. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I studied political science and did a bunch of like side activity work inside of an ads club called American Advertising Federation. I always knew I loved creative work. I knew I loved marketing. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. So I landed in this job, which I was very happy to get, but used none of the things that I was interested in or had skills in. And I found a way through that organization to build a marketing department. The first one they'd ever had. I got to work in advertising for big utilities like Con Edison and PG&E in California. And after about a decade of that work, I wanted something different. And I thought maybe I wanted to work in an agency. And I'd been in a place so long, I'm sure people listening can relate. You feel like you've pushed yourself into a niche where you can't do something different. I know you and I have talked about that a lot. Your resume tells a story of like the things you have done, not the things you can do. And it's really hard to find people to think about you in a different box. And on a cold, maybe it wasn't cold, but in my mind, it was like a cold March in New York. I was randomly applying for jobs online. Someone I knew was like, oh, there's this energy management software company in Texas that's hiring a ton of people, so you should apply. And I found a role as director of product marketing. No fucking idea what that meant, but I read the skills and I was like, oh, this is like kind of what I do. And I know this buyer really well. My husband, Nate, was at a conference in Chicago and I applied like at 10 p.m. The next day, I got a call from the administrative leader there to schedule an interview. By the time my husband got back on a Friday from his conference, they were offering to fly me to Austin for an in-person interview. And I'll never forget the look in his eyes when he was like, fucking hell, we're moving to Texas. And I was like, no, I'm going to negotiate remote. Like, they're not going to hire me. I've never done this job. I have no idea how to work in tech or startups. Anyway, long story short is one of my lifelong mentors, who unfortunately has passed away, named Dave Jaros, took a chance on me. He saw something in me and he relocated me and my husband from New York to Austin. And I've been in tech ever since. And I found, I think, what is the culmination of all the skills that are natural to me: code switching, bringing people together, telling stories, and advocating for the little guy, the user, the customer, which is effectively how I got into product marketing. I spent the rest of my career there working in HR technology. And then in the last 5 years, moving over to work in big tech and FANG, which is a whole different experience. But I found the thing that I love to do, which is product marketing. And I've gotten to do it in some pretty cool places.
You're an excellent product marketer. I would say you're your number one product, and you've done a fantastic job. Also, going back to your original mission of being a fashion designer, you could have done that too.
There might still be time.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're ever looking for some like Gen Z looks as a millennial, Ty's got your back, sister. She is always with it on the trends. Navigating FANG, you mentioned the transition from startup world to FANG. Sorry, do you listen to SmartList? You do, right?
Obviously.
Okay. Whenever I love SmartList, I love podcasts. That's why I'm here. That's why I love doing this. Shout out to Stephanie for pushing me to do it. But it's Will Arnett. I'm thinking of Just Jack.
Sean Hayes.
Yes. Okay. You know, when they're doing every episode, like when they don't know something, they'll be like, shout out to his sister.
Mm-hmm.
What's his sister's name?
But I'm not going to remember right now.
Okay.
As soon as you stop filming, it's going to come to
me. When he's like, shout out to Wendy. We'll just call her that. Like, yeah. He's like, for Wendy out there, this is who blah, blah, blah is. So like, for Wendy, aka my mom, who listens to every episode because number one fan, can you explain what FANG is?
Yes, sort of. FANG is an acronym for Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. It's really meant to represent sort of the top of the top in technology companies. And I'm sure there is some like stock related reason that they grouped those companies, but it's effectively a conglomerate of the biggest tech companies in the world who, as they build and grow, a lot of the practices, a lot of the way they structure pay, a lot of the way they incentivize their employees is similar. And so when you participate or become an employee in a FANG company, when you start to navigate other companies of that caliber, you find the way that they incent and structure packages is really similar. And a lot of the way that the teams are structured, these multi-matrix sort of things, are very similar. It's easier to navigate. So when you hear people say big tech, that's mostly what they're talking about.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think from now on, like, shout out to SmartList for being one of my favorite podcasts that I listened to for so long when I was stuck in a car. And hopefully there's people that are doing that here. So now they'll get the inside joke. And I'm like, for Yolande, because for those of you that don't know, my mom's name is Yolanda. And she's amazing, by the way, Yolanda. She is the most fabulous woman. She is my diva queen. And she has so much beautiful, like, energy. And she's always dressed to the nines. And because of that, Taina coined her Yolande, like Beyonce.
Correct.
So anytime now that I need someone to ask a question, be like, for Yolande, can you please? Thank you. Thank you, Sean Hayes.
His sister, actually.
Yeah, thank you, his sister. Okay. So appreciate that. And sorry to take us on a tangent. But it's what makes this thing fun. What was the transition like from startup world to Fang?
Okay. Two vectors to navigate. The first is like getting a job in Fang is very different than getting a job inside of a startup. And I've worked now sort of like public nonprofit sector, lots of years in startup, and then now in big tech. When my neighbor Sam, shout out to Sam, referred me in for a job at Meta, I was interviewing for lots of other stuff at the time. I was at a transition point where I was looking for something different. And in specific, I was looking for something that had like a local office because I was working fully remote for a company whose offices were overseas and was just like having a really challenging time managing my daily central time life. And we talked for like 4.5 months. I was for sure thought I was out of the running. I was moving on into another opportunity when I got a call from the recruiter who told me I was the candidate that they selected. For sure thought it was done. For sure thought like it was a fun experience to have gone through that and have been sort of like managed through a recruitment process because it is very specific the way that big technology companies run their interview processes, the way they loop people, the way you meet different folks who are looking at different parts of your fit inside of the cultural ethos of the company, your experience, your skills, and then how you approach different types of problems that you encounter inside of that business. So that was one part that was really different. And then the second part was once I got the job offer, I was navigating an offer that had no comparability to the things that I'd had in the past. Prior to working in Fang, really your compensation package was made up of your base salary and then some small bonus that's based on usually partly your own performance and partly the company's performance, but had never had anything beyond 15%. And that was really high and not really negotiable. It's sort of set for the whole company, including your bosses. So when I got the first offer inside of a Fang company, when I got the offer from Meta, I discovered the world of equity, which like, what is it even? I didn't know. I'm still learning. It's a journey to understand what equity is, how to use it, how you leverage it to build your own wealth, how you think about it in relationship to your compensation annually and then over time as it grows. But I think maybe the biggest challenge was finding any way to think about that in the context of like, is this good? I didn't know. It sounded great. It was a much higher base salary and bonus. And then there was this amorphous thing called equity, which had numbers next to it and seemed like it was going to come to me, but you don't know. You don't get paid right away. And I'm happy to talk about how equity works or gets paid out. It looks different at every Fang company or every big tech company. And to be fair, there is equity in startups as well. I just haven't been at a startup that had an exit where my equity was worth anything to me. So it's all sort of like monopoly money until it's not. And the difference inside of equity at a company that's publicly traded is that there is real dollars against the stock ticker, against the shares that you are given and that vest over time while you're in the company. So I did zero negotiation. I took the offer as is. And that was mostly happy dancing for me at the time.
Yeah. And did you learn along the way, like how many different big tech companies have you worked at? How many parts of Fang companies have you worked at?
Now 3, but I've been in one other big tech company that is not part of that.
Okay. And did the negotiation change from time to time?
Yeah, definitely. I think you sort of learn 2 things. And I think we talk a lot about the pay gap and the gender gap in compensation for men and women. And the thing I will say is after having been in other organizations prior to moving into big tech, it really is a black box. You actually have no idea. Everyone can negotiate whatever. And a lot of the way that you negotiate is based on what you were making at your last company. a few things that I found fascinating, exciting, and sort of like make me feel like the world is moving in the right direction when you move into big tech, is that there really is a whole team of people that look at fair compensation across geographies, for the skill set that you are in, for how many years of experience you have, for the leveling in your role. Because they have such large workforces, it sort of requires a scale to be built, which there's some variability inside of, but there aren't people making wildly large swings doing your same job in the same band that you're in. Now, Austin is like a second tier pay rate city for most tech organizations, but like New York and San Francisco have a way that their tiers are structured, and then there is a logic that moves it around so that people are effectively being paid the fairest wage in the geo that they live in. And so they should technically be able to have like comparable lifestyle working for that same company in Charlotte versus Fort Lauderdale versus New York City. So that was interesting and new to me. And it actually is cool because you get to see at pay bands, people sort of know, like if I get a promotion, my pay band is going to look like this, and you can negotiate inside that band. And the bonus and equity are tied to those tiering and your time in the business. And it's sort of like laid out in a very clear way that you can navigate, at least up to a certain level in an organization.
Interesting. What would your advice be to people that are maybe, navigating that transition to Fang and from startup land?
Yeah, I'd say there's three things that you can do that I think are important. The first is to do your homework. There's Blind, there's Glassdoor. A lot of the pay scales, mostly older ones, are available online so that you can get a range. There's also like a culture of deeply informed professional recruiting inside of big tech. Like, work with your recruiter. They are your partner in making sure that you get the best offer for you. And a lot of big tech companies, they don't ask you what you are making. They just look at your skills, your experience, and they look at the band for the level of the role. And so they are going to help you make sure that you do not underprice yourself by, not looking for potential jumps, or, they try to max out what they're giving you because they know that you're jumping into a pool of peers where if you come in at the lowest part of the tier, but you're technically should be in the middle, that you have catching up to do to stay in line with your peers, even if it's a pay band within $20,000 in salary or something like that. And then the third is, if you know other people who work inside of that organization, have conversations. There's a little bit less of a stigma. Now it changes from group to group depending on like you work in product, you work in marketing. The pay ranges are different depending on what group you work in, but you can find someone who's willing to have a conversation, even just to gut check what you're asking for, what you're hearing once you get an offer. They will give you the best perspective around whether you should be pushing in any part of your comp package. They're happy to do so. Nobody wants someone to join and be like grossly undervaluing their potential contribution to the business. Because once you're locked in, then you're on the trajectory of growth that's available to you within the business. When you make a change is the time where you have the most opportunity to get a big jump.
And we talked about the gender pay gap, but what about being a woman of color? I feel like there probably aren't that many women of color that have, call it executive level positions. How has that transition been for you?
That's a really good question. I think I've learned a few things in terms of, one, I think that code switch element comes back into play, but I think you are very visible as a person of color, and particularly as a leader, a people manager, or a leader of a team or a department, in a way that immediately, and maybe without your desire, causes people to see you as a representative or a role model. And I think that's important and pressure filled. I think sometimes something that you don't necessarily recognize, because among your peers, you're just another one of your peers. But when you look across an organization for people who are just starting, particularly in a field like product marketing, it's like very rare to see women of color. And when you see somebody in a leadership position that's a woman of color, there's often a desire to sort of understand, like, how do I navigate this? How do I make my voice heard? How do I just be part of the team and not feel like I have to sort of like earn my stripes? So I think the hardest part is understanding that you're not just doing your job, you're also representing a pathway for other people. And it's a pressure and it's also a privilege. And you just have to know that eyes are on you. And that's good and terrible. But for me, it has been a privilege to get to meet young product marketers, women of color, who many of them have reached out when I've transitioned into roles or moved on to other companies, and just like shared how, it's good to see someone that looks like you. Representation matters. And I will say, like, in my career, it's very limited the number of women of color that I've seen, particularly that look like me, that are Black and Latin, and who came from places like where I came from, right? Like, I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I didn't start my career in tech. And so being able to participate in those forums is an important way to sort of let people know that it's possible to get there.
Well, thank you for being that representation for all of us. We talked a little bit about your comp packages and you gave advice. Have you had any mistakes that you learned from in like receiving RSUs or any of those things? I know that that's particularly important, a particularly important piece of the comp package for people at big tech companies.
Yeah, I think mistake one is I didn't do the 3 things that I suggested earlier. I was moving from an industry that did not have comparable compensation levels or packages, and I didn't really have anybody to talk to about it, or I didn't feel comfortable talking to like my neighbor friends about what I would theoretically be making. And I should have. And I don't know definitively that I left money on the table or that I was in a position to negotiate, but I did take an offer without really pushing. And I think that never accept the first offer, or at least evaluate it very well and understand what levers or triggers you might have to pull. And maybe there are none, maybe it's great. Like, I've also been on the receiving end of a recruiter who worked really hard to get me the first best package possible, and I was really happy with it. And I knew that she had maxed out everything that she could do. But that doesn't always happen. And so I think you have to be your own advocate. I think the second piece, navigating equity, is a totally different ballgame. And I'll share an experience I had. I'd never been in a situation where I was getting equity. I was coming up against my first stock vest at Meta, and I had a friend who is awesome. He'd been there 9 years. He fancies himself a bit of an investment guru, and we were at a happy hour with some other colleagues. And, maybe for the first time, for some of them, there was a guard down, like, how do we talk about what we do with these shares? Do you sell? Do you keep? What are the tax implications? And so, like, many cocktails later, we were in this conversation, which probably wouldn't have happened not at a bar. And I remember this colleague saying, you are already too leveraged in this company. You work here. You're going to receive part of your compensation in stock here. Your bonus is tied to here. Your health insurance, like, everything about you is tied to this company. If that goes away, or the company has an issue, you have no risk mitigation against the success of the company. So his recommendation is to sell. This is not financial advice. This is just what he told me.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, his recommendation, and I'm sure like this is sound for many people, is to sell as soon as you vest stock, so that you are not 100% leveraged financially into the business and carrying the success or failure of the business as a part of your portfolio, which I did in a year where Meta stock was worth $89. And it's worth $611 today, or something around that range. I don't know if that's a mistake. You can't know what you don't know about the market, but the mistake I did make is not talking to anybody else about it. And I had an aversion to working with like a company funded brokerage. I don't know why. I think I was scared. I think I didn't want people poking around in my money. I didn't know how to talk the talk. I still don't totally. but I feel a little bit more confident after several years of working in this industry to ask questions. And so I trusted and did not verify. I just sort of did what I heard someone else did who I thought was smart. And, the decision is done. You can't put it back. And since then, I've had a lot more engagement and conversation, a little bit more openness around how you think about that part of your compensation, how it could grow theoretically. And that's the reason that it's part of your package. You're invested as a shareholder in the business, which means that you're making decisions on behalf of the business's growth and its financial well-being, hopefully your own as well. But I think you can't just decide based on one opinion. And if you don't know anything, like I certainly did not, I think it is your responsibility to find a trusted advisor, whether it is through the brokerage that the company sets up for you, or it's a fabulous financial friend, or it's somebody you know who's a second or third check to ensure that you're making the right decisions. And the last thing is get a great CPA, someone who understands tax implications, because I also didn't do that the first time around. And it's critical. It's important. It's stuff that until you cross a certain threshold in annual compensation, you don't really have to think about. But when the IRS bill comes, it's real.
Hey, we're here for you at Huntress, uh, something we are excited to help people with is navigating their RSUs and comp packages and coaching people just generally about the education on that, getting the confidence to be able to talk about it and make those decisions on your own.
Yeah. And I think, the longer we sit here, the more I'm thinking about the fact that it's much broader than that. There's also 401k packages and matching. There's Roth options. There's, in some cases, organizations will pay for parts of wellness, or they'll pay for parts of childcare or vacation. Some of it's tax-free, some of it's not. So I think in particular, when you are looking across a series of financial decisions, it's really easy to take them as they come. Like you're going through open enrollment, so you pick all your stuff, and then you're able to pick what happens in your 401k, and you pick that. This is something I'm navigating, maybe not for the first time, but like it's a journey to think about what that looks like altogether year over year, and how all of the other things that you invest in, like your home, like your cars, your saving for your kids' school, all those things compound or interact or intersect. And if the only person who's looking at that at the end of the year is your CPA, that's probably problematic. I can say it's problematic from experience. So it's important to look at the whole picture and not only thinking about compensation as your comp package that's related to salary.
Very insightful. You mentioned you wish you would have talked to someone, just not from a professional perspective, but who, or it could be a professional perspective, honestly, but who do you talk to about money?
No one. That's terrible. I am this many days old in deep recognition that I am not practicing what I have preached on this call. Some of this is like the sum of realization over time and moving companies and having to deal with rolling over a 401k and just like stuff you don't think about when you're just thinking about like, I make this much and I pay this much in my bills. There's so much more in the periphery that actually could really help you, can sometimes hurt you. And I don't know, it's the reason that it's important, even if you're not in FANG, even if you're in startups, even if you work for the city of Austin, like it's important to look at all those things holistically. And if you don't have a background that allows you to look at that holistic picture and see patterns or critical deductions, investments, opportunities, find someone that you trust who can either do that for you or can help you get connected to someone they trust. Earlier, I was talking about not feeling super confident in the Fidelity or whoever, Morgan Stanley brokerage that were set up by the company. Maybe that's my bad, totally, and they're amazing. But if you think about what we talked about earlier in the podcast, just, like money is embarrassing. Not having money is embarrassing. Making financial mistakes is embarrassing. And some of that is like carried shame. So having a professional look at your finances, even if it's just a portion of it, feels like you're going to have to divulge things that you don't necessarily want people to know. I And maybe some of it's not even bad, but it's like someone opening your cupboard.
Yeah.
That old ass pepper mill. That's gross.
I will say that, that's the whole point of this podcast and our live events that we have, is to destigmatize the money thing, because money is scary, and we all, especially as women, have been taught it's like not the right thing to talk about, or it's not appropriate, it's not dinner table conversation. But the reality is, not talking about it has bad implications, because we don't know what we don't know. And
yeah,
I thank you for sharing, because there's a bunch of people here that probably don't talk about money and are hearing your story today, and they'll talk about it now. You better.
Yeah.
Huntresses. Throughout this podcast recording, you've given a lot of advice. So what is your biggest advice for all the huntresses out there?
2 things. Get a good CPA. Seriously, get a good CPA. There's a moment in time where you are not maximizing your deductions, or you move states and you miss something, and there's a point in time where it makes sense to have a professional looking at your taxes. And the second is, sometimes the mistakes that you make are actually the things that help you rectify long-term bad habits. But when we moved to Austin, part of the allure of moving to Texas was the ability to not have state income tax. Makes a marked difference in your paycheck, in your take home. And we weren't homeowners at the time. And part of the way I got my husband to decide to leave New York City was that we were going to go to the World Cup in Brazil. And I had a very small 401k, which also, if your employer provides any sort of match, invest up to the match, just do it. It's like free money. But I did not really understand how 401ks worked. I put very little into it. I had a very small, sub $10,000 401k, and we were prepping for this big trip. And I was like, I don't need this. I'm starting a new one with my new company. And so I cashed it out and paid a gigantic tax penalty in order to help propel our trip to the World Cup in Brazil. Do I regret it? Absolutely not. Magical, incredible moment in my life. I don't take it back. But I wish that I'd had someone to talk to me about what it might have meant, and what that money might have looked like rolled over into the new 401k that I started at the next company. And yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Then the last thing is, what does rich mean to you? And if you don't mind, break the fourth wall. Give me a clip. Give me a good clip.
Hi, huntresses. Rich to me means an ability to live your life right now, in the now. Being able to experience the things that you want to in the moment that you are healthy, able, and interested in doing it. Watching so many people in immigrant communities save for the end, save for retirement, for the trip they'll take when they're all done. I've had a lot of loss in my family in the last several years, and I don't know that that time is afforded to all of us. And so for me, wealth, richness is an ability to live in the present and to experience the things with my family, with the people that I love right now, and not having to save it and ensuring that it happens, versus the risk that life changes our trajectory and our course and that we're not able to.
YOLO.
YOLO,
but and no FOMO in investing.
But no YOLO that you cash in your 401k to go to the Don't do that.
YOLO, but no FOMOing when it comes to investing money and getting that compounded growth.
Correct. Compound that shit.
Compound that. Get that FU money. So thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to say bye, huntresses? Or do you want to say, talk rich to me?
I do not want to say talk rich to me.
You sure?
Yeah.
It's fun.
No, I'll say bye, huntresses.
Okay.
Bye, huntresses.
Bye, huntresses. See you next time.
You've been listening to Talk Rich to Me, a production from Huntress Wealth. For more chill takes on finance, sign up for our newsletter at huntresswealth.com. That's HUNTRESSWEALTH.com.